So the reason we're holding the session today is we did an event on this topic. It was nearly sort of 7-8 weeks ago now, and that session was we got some really positive feedback on it, but I think it didn't really give people the opportunity to ask the questions that they'd like to ask. So we wanted to do a follow-up today, which is an opportunity to get into some of the detail of the conversation, and an opportunity to reflect on what was learnt before and to ask questions. And in order to make the best use of time possible, we did ask people to submit questions ahead of the session today, so we can hopefully move through at quite some pace and get some really decent responses from our panel that have kindly joined us today. And if you do have questions outside of what we've kind of collected ahead of today, please do put them into the chat, and we'll be monitoring that during the course of the next hour, and we can kind of build those into the conversation if we have time at the end as well. So first of all, I just wanted to introduce myself, I guess. So I'm Cassie, Cassie Sissons, and I'm MD at Amberjack, and we've got a great panel today, some of which joined us before, which includes both people that are specialists on the topic of neurodiversity. We've got people that are working in-house within large employers focused on this topic, and we've got some recent graduates that have been through recruitment processes themselves most recently, and kind of really got some valid experience that they can share with us on what that process looks like for people that do have neurodiverse needs. So without further ado, I'd like to ask the panel to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Theo, because I can see you most clearly. So if you'd like to say hi and introduce yourself and then work through, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm Theo Smith. I'm a recruiter by trade, actor before then. Yeah, I've recently, in the last few years, written a book about neurodiversity at work, because I'm a dad of neurodiverse, neurodivergent children, and therefore I've explored and experienced the challenges that they've faced, and didn't see enough resources, information to support me as a recruitment leader and me as a dad from a positive context rather than the typical negative context. So now I do a lot of advocacy work, I do training, and I support organisations with better understanding neurodiversity within the workplace. Thank you.
Thanks, Theo. Thank you. Eleanor.
I'm Eleanor Abbey. I work at EY in the Student Talent Attraction Acquisition team as a Senior Operations Advisor, which basically means from the point an individual applies to the point they get offered, I work to keep moving them through the process. As part of this, I look at our recruitment systems and process ahead of each recruitment season, and also partner with the business. And within the student team, I'm also the ability champion, which means I support our teams in conversations they're having with candidates with disabilities and who might require adjustments. And I also ensure that we have an inclusive process at the start of each recruiting season, and will support colleagues in making adjustments if needed, and help upskill them on all things ability.
Thanks, Eleanor. Di, would you like to introduce yourself?
And hi everyone, so I'm Di Crawford, so I'm one of the senior assessment consultants at Amberjack, and so I'm very much a business psychologist at heart. Support clients on all things related to assessment selection, so all the way from application form, online tests, video interviews, final stage assessment centres, and very much kind of live and breathe the Amberjack mantra of kind of progressing and hiring people solely based on their future potential. And if we do really kind of hone in on that neurodiversity piece in particular, just really trying to make sure with the clients we work with, ensure neurodiverse candidates are able to showcase their potential at all stages of the process. To have to kind of share some of my insights and kind of journey to date as well.
Thanks, Di. And then in addition, as I said, we've got some recent graduates joining the panel today to give their perspectives. Angela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Angela. I'm currently a PhD student, and I'm working as well. I've just been an author recently, or published author, I should say. And I learned about my disability when I was in university, my second year.
Thanks, Angela. And finally, welcome, Adam.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Daffodil. I worked as a consultant, and I have for a few years now at a large firm. I was an apprentice, so that means I worked 1 day a week while I went to university 4 days a week. And I have a condition called dyspepsia, so I was born with it, and essentially it means I have a little bit of a speech impediment. I'm quite bad at hand-eye coordination, And that's it really. And it's a spectrum. So people have it very severely, or people don't have it, not so badly.
Thanks, guys. So the panel there, lots of different experiences and backgrounds to kind of share and give their perspectives as we move through the session. So I'm going to kick off straight away by going straight to you, Theo, with a question for you. That's all right. You look very excited and ready to receive that question. So just in your experience for organisations starting out on the journey, how would you suggest building engagement internally and educate the key stakeholders? Are there tried and tested methods that you've experienced or training that you could share with the group today?
Yeah, you need to show that you care first and foremost, and that you can do that in a number of ways. First is providing a platform for your current employees to have a voice or to feel that they're heard and that they're understood. And you can do that by allowing people with confidence who want to share their experiences, as we've got people today within organisations to explain, how it affects them, impacts them, what's good, the bad, and that really allows others then to have some level of confidence and comfort to ask some questions, especially people who may not have any understanding at all, and therefore they need to be upskilled. But you've got to remember as well, some of these employees are parents, and they will be facing challenges as well. They don't necessarily identify as being neurodivergent or ADHD or dyspraxic or whatever else it may be, but they may still face challenges. So it's finding different opportunities for these individuals who are impacted in very different ways to have their voice. And if you are concerned about that, at the very beginning, then you can bring people in from external advisors, consultants, speakers, whatever it may be, to come in and to facilitate and support that early conversation. Because once you open Pandora's box, you might be surprised about what comes out. So having some preparation around that often can help. But there's training available. I've just done my own micro-learning training. You can talk to me about that. Introduction for managers and employees around neurodiversity. I'm filming for Social Talent, if anybody knows that. That's recruitment training around neurodiversity. That'll be coming out live soon. And then you've got LinkedIn. I've taken some of that training as well. You'll find that book in the background of some of that training. So there are now many opportunities to kind of have micro-learning training for managers, employees to upskill themselves in understanding. And the other thing is individuals won't know their own challenges. So they may go, oh, I think I'm ADHD because my son or daughter's just been diagnosed with it, but actually I don't understand my challenges. So then you've got stuff like Amanda's Do It Profiler, others are available, but that helps you understand your strengths and your challenges as an individual. But also as a manager, you could take it to support and facilitate the understanding of your employees as well.
When you're trying to build that engagement internally with key stakeholders that are looking for talent to come into their teams and shifting that dial, do you have any data or evidence about the positive impact of recruiting more neurodiverse workforce? I think that's something that businesses are very much looking for that data point on.
Yeah, so there's insights from Deloitte and Apple that focus, they've got a lot of research, and they have done for many years, right, around diverse teams performing better. But actually, they've taken that one step further, and you can find this on the web, or I can share it. Their insight reveals that high-performing teams are both cognitively and demographically diverse. And by cognitive diversity, they're referring to kind of educational and functional diversity, as well as diversity in the mental frameworks that people use to solve problems. And we know that if we look at people who are dyslexic, I mean, it's not, we're talking about a spectrum. We understand that you don't fit into one label, one box. You may identify more with one. Likelihood is there are a number of factors that will impact you, where you grew up, family, and all the other things, the variety of stuff going on in the brain. We know that people who are dyslexic, for example, often see in 3D. They are highly creative, but in not better than somebody else, in a different way to somebody else. And that is powerful within a team when you bring these different levels of creativity that are highly spiky in different areas, because obviously then we start to plug gaps. And we can look at that across autism, we can look at ADHD, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got people in history solving some of the greatest technical problems of our times who are neurodivergent or neurodiverse in that context. So there's plenty of evidence there, but there's now also empirical evidence. I interviewed Zoe and Laura at Springfield Specialist School and Cheshire East Council, access to work funding, where an individual in my home area, Holmes Chapel, who was non-verbal, autistic, came into a work environment that was traditional manufacturing, packaging. The team were like, how is this non-verbal autistic person going to be able to fit into the team, work and do a good job? To the point, this was on the local news, where they got to the point of where they showed the evidence. Not only were the team like, wow, they're good. They were like, this person's better than us. They work harder, they're more committed, they're more focused because they have less distractions. What they just had to find was the ability to communicate in that environment. They don't not have ability to communicate, they just don't communicate verbally like other people. So how do we connect those dots? Because if we do, the empirical evidence is now there across these organizations who've introduced individuals that are having a significant impact on a team, but the team needs to transform the way that they think. But also then we think of the wider impact on society. If my daughter's being bullied by another child because they lack an understanding of my daughter being autistic and some of the way that she interacts in the environment, that is impacted by their parents' lack of understanding and them going to work or not inside. If we can influence a team to go, I can work with somebody who's non-verbal autistic, to going, wow, they're the best person in our team. They go home, they tell their family, they tell their children go into the school, a complete transformation in understanding. So I think the evidence, it's, you know, it's great that Deloitte do all this big evidence, but I think this empirical evidence is really powerful. And we can see how that works on an individual level for an organisation, no matter how big or small.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good perspective. I think you're building on your kind of point you made a little bit earlier about kind of third-party organisations that you can also bring into the conversation internally to help educate, train and support. I think, Ellen, it would be great to understand, I think, from you some of the experiences you've had with that at EY as well, some of the businesses that you've been working with just to support, you know, the organisation.
Yeah, definitely. So I really recommend, and it's someone that we work with a lot, MyPlus Consulting. And this isn't just for neurodiversity. They offer recruitment support for all disabilities. And depending on the different membership level that you subscribe to, you get invitations to different workshops and webinars on a variety of topics, marketing material support, training, consulting days, and also access to their CEO by email or phone to answer your queries, and also job advert postings. And just as well, for example, I know that their next virtual workshop, I think, is in June, and it's on understanding the impacts and benefits of neurodiversity, and that's targeted at people who are in recruitment and also in the actual business itself. I'd also recommend a charity called Ambitious about autism. They're a UK national charity which aims to improve opportunities for young people with autism. And they have really detailed free toolkits on their website to support recruitment and young people. And they also offer free webinars. So again, for example, I know in the upcoming months, they're running a session a couple of times. I believe it's called an introduction to recruiting autistic talent. And then finally, I haven't actually worked with this company before directly. I only learned about them quite recently, but it's a company called Lexit. And they partner with organisations, schools and universities and members of the public to make a positive difference, creating neurodiversity smart workplaces, cultures, high impact programmes, and they also deliver psychological support services to neurodiverse talent.
Thank you. And just while I've got you and while you're still talking, one of the other questions that was submitted, which I think, you know, your perspective on will be really helpful, was kind of the challenges that organisations have faced into when addressing the issue of recruiting and, you know, in implementing, I guess, the more neurodiverse workforce. I think particularly organisations as large as EY, it'd be great to get some perspective on that from you too.
Yeah, definitely. I think honestly, in respect to my team, I think the biggest challenge we've faced is in the attraction aspect of our work when we're talking to candidates with kind of all disabilities. If an individual on my team hasn't had a lot of experience or training, I found quite commonly they get nervous having conversations about support we can offer and adjustments that we can make in the process, and then also support that we can offer in the workplace. And that's purely because they don't want to say the wrong thing. And I think in terms of overcoming that in my team specifically, it's ongoing. We are constantly learning, but our solution to this is training and continuous learning. And like I know I've already mentioned MyPlus, but we work with MyPlus, and once a year I'll work with them to produce a training session on key topics we want to upskill ourselves in. And the workshops and webinars that I mentioned throughout the year, colleagues in my team will rotate going on these sessions as well. So everyone is upskilling themselves and becoming more confident to have these conversations. And again, at EY, we have quite a lot of on-demand internal learning available. So we're just encouraging people to do that and really kind of make themselves more confident in the topic, so we can kind of be more supportive and give that support to candidates that need it. I think another challenge we faced is candidates actually sharing the adjustments that they require in recruitment processes. In our application form at EY, we ask, do you consider yourself to have a disability as defined under the Equality Act 2010? And then candidates can answer yes, no, or prefer not to say. We then ask if they require any adjustments to the process. We don't ask them to share what the disability is, but if they want to, they can. As well as graduates, we recruit quite a lot of school leavers, and I think especially in this population, they have less experience. They can be more hesitant to share that they have a disability and that they would like adjustments. And this is a challenge because without knowing that someone needs that support, we can't help them. I think we've overcome this by just being really open on our website and saying that we'll support candidates throughout the process. We have open communication with them on any adjustments or support they require throughout it. And again, then at each stage in our process, we remind candidates that if they need any adjustments they haven't yet shared with us, then to please do so, because we can't apply that retrospectively. We need to be aware. So then even if a candidate hasn't kind of formally disclosed that on the application form, we will still make the adjustments for them, because we want everyone to kind of have a fair and equal opportunity in the process.
And I think from your perspective, Adam and Angela, bringing you into the conversation now, what Ellen has just shared about what EOI are trying to do to enable a more inclusive kind of environment for students to think they will fit in, and that their challenges can be overcome during the assessment and the application process. What do you think employers could do more of to appeal to neurodiverse candidates in that process? It would be great to understand some of your experiences most recently.
Yeah, sure. It's actually really interesting what Eleanor just said, because when I actually applied to work at my firm, I did literally what she said. I said I have a disability, and when they said you need support, I said no, right? Because I thought this might count against me if I need something someone else doesn't. It's more a headache for the company, which is quite interesting. But in general, in terms of more appealing to us, I feel like we just need more marketing material that shows neurodiverse people do work here, right? So when I was applying to my job a few years ago now, sort of on the website, it very clearly called out one of the core values was having people from all different sorts of backgrounds. Like there were people with existing conditions there working. So then when I saw that, I thought, they're clearly about this. People here are working here and they're succeeding. So why can't I do the same, right? And I think that's just the key thing, is calling out that other diverse people out there.
That's really interesting. Angela, what do you think of that? What would you say? Would you support that, or do you have a different view?
Representation.
Yeah.
But being a bit older, I do think it's a mental thought. So sometimes I don't tick that I've got a disability because I'm like, that's not going to help me. Because it's been around for so long and no one actually done anything with it. And it would be, I'll tick it, and then in the interview I might have to then say, excuse me, can you repeat something a couple of times so I can grasp it? But then what's the point of ticking it? So it makes me uncomfortable, and I've already got a learning difficulty. I'm nervous, I'm trying to do a job interview, and I have to remind you that I've got a disability which you have no understanding of. So it is like it's a lot of pressure on you. So more more advertising for a university, maybe have more talks, have more panel discussions with people, not necessarily have to be big time directors, but who have come through the educational system, and you can say this is what I've learned as well, and have some partnerships with either university or with people with neurodiversity as well, so you can see how it works in the real world.
And do you when you just reference the kind of the pressure in an interview situation, if you haven't disclosed a disability and then in the session then trying to kind of succeed, I guess, in that environment, do you think if you were able to share that information ahead of the application process or at the outset of the application process because you felt that it wouldn't be it wouldn't be seen as a negative, but actually it would be seen as an understanding of what they need to do in order to enable a situation for you to succeed. Is that really what you're saying, that you'd be looking to be able to have that already done so you can relax into the interview environment?
Yes, because sometimes I have ticked it, sometimes I haven't, and in either case, the same things happen during an interview. So, and that's why I've become like I'm so a bit nonchalant on whether I should tick it or what I should do, because it makes no difference.
So if you saw sort of a marketing sort of campaign around that organisation on their website and in their materials that actually you know, showcased individuals that had been successful in the organisation or talked about the, you know, their inclusive environment, that would make you more likely to tick that box, if you like, because you knew it, fine. But if there was nothing about it, you would be reticent in declaring it. Yeah. Theo, have you got any perspective on that before we move on to the next question? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I have. I think there's a real problem with the ticking of the box. And it's just been mentioned there. Most candidates are suspect of it. They don't trust it, and therefore they don't want to tick it. It's a mechanism for measurement, and therefore often, you know, candidates are not stupid. They see within organisations what happens. We track and we trace these metrics, right? We present them if we have to, because we're part of, you know, government organisation. So we can track and trace that to say, you know, we're disproportionately hiring more men than women, or whatever else it may be. But then we do nothing with it because we think, oh, well, that's for next year. That's the next D&I initiative or whatever it is. So the problem is we've got the evidence, we've got the information, we do nothing with it often. And then we say also it's a way to support individuals. Well, no, it can't be all those things. Do you know what I mean? And then a candidate coming through the process will go, right, that box, I don't trust it, I'm not going to tick it. And to Andrew's point, maybe if there's enough information comes, you'll go, I have a bit more confidence, therefore this time I'm going to tick it. But you probably still end up going to the interview and go, they did nothing with it. But the bigger problem, the really big problem here, is that a disproportionate amount of people who, women, for example, don't come with the diagnosis. So we have to fight for the diagnosis if you're a woman. Probably like 4 to 1, 4 men to 1 women have an autism diagnosis, right? So that means unless you're a white middle-aged man, we're back to that point again, right? You're less likely to have the box ticking ability, because I don't have the disability because I never got the diagnosis, so I can't tick the box. So therefore I'm disabled from ticking the box, which is supposed to be there to help me. So I think we need to move away from a box ticking exercise to and this is everyone, right? Hardly anybody's doing this. So we're all moving towards this, hopefully. But we need to be able to ask in more questions around how we help individuals through this process. That is not like, are you disabled? It's like, basically, can we offer you a different type of content for you to read? You know, can video, audio, because, you know, you may be dyslexic, or you may have challenges because you've got sight problems because something hit you in the eye recently and therefore you need to listen to it rather than watch it. Or like there's a number of different factors that can impact you in that moment. That means you have a disability. If somebody came in with a broken hand to an interview, they go, I can't write. You want me to write? I can't do it. I've broken my hand. Yet when it's something else that's neurological, we really fear about saying it because the other person can't see it. So it's not like going, I've broken my hand, therefore I can't do this thing that you want me to do with my hand. Therefore you have to make an adjustment. It's a neurological thing, and you know they're not going to get it. So I think we need to start to empower candidates by giving them alternative choices around how they can access the interview, the assessment process, and everything else. And that's our responsibility. But we need to work with the candidates to understand what that looks like. And we are still in a moment where the candidate may not know that. So this is where we need to kind of seek external support and guidance and take feedback so that we can make those adjustments.
One of the questions we get asked a lot, I don't know if other employers on the call do this, but it's, you know, when we want to, you know, target, if you like, candidates, neurodiverse candidates, specifically because we want to raise the bar organisationally. How do we do it? How do we go about it? And what I'm hearing today is very much about what you say and how you market yourselves, as opposed to going to a specific place, if you like, to target. But has anyone had any experience of using, you know, specific kind of community-based websites or kind of student groups or anything like that that's specifically targeting neurodiverse candidates? I think because that is a question we get asked a lot, and it's not something that we necessarily recommend. It's more about what you say, but it'd be great to get any feedback on that. Yes, you may speak.
I mean, well, you've got to go where the communities are, right? And you've got to understand, be warned, that they won't suffer fools gladly. So if you really want to engage with the community, you've got to truly understand why you're engaging with that community. And it cannot be tokenistic. And where is the representation? Now, social media is an incredible place to be able to connect with those communities. And social media marketing is a very low cost effective way to be able to do that. However, people see ads, they know what ads are. So again, you've got to be mindful of what you're doing with that ad, right? Now, if you're using the ads to invite people to an event where they can have a voice and some representation, they can join in the conversation, that's powerful and meaningful, and you can start a narrative that way. If you're just putting a job advert and going, hey, we're neurodiverse friendly, look at us, and then somebody else going, yeah, I just left you 5 minutes ago and let me tell you I'm autistic and you ain't friendly. These are the things that you have to consider if you want to go out and connect with communities. You have to really think about how you engage them. So it's not necessarily a challenge to connect with these communities because they're big, they're vocal. I'm members of lots of them across different areas, whether it's Facebook. Instagram is huge for individuals talking about the challenges they face at the moment as being somebody who's neurodivergent within this world. So the communities are there. It's how you interact with them in a meaningful way that matters. So that's what you need to start considering. But there's other channels like the Bridge of Hope, for example, as a way to advertise jobs. They're not neurodivergent specific, but there's already charities that have been mentioned, you know, National Autistic Society, as well as another one, that lots of different channels where you can start to engage to show you care about that particular community.
Great. And Ellen, have you got anything to add to that from your attraction marketing activities that at EY? Or just kind of echo what Thea's.
Yeah, no, I completely echo that, and kind of echoing what Adam mentioned earlier as well, just about as well it not just being token, like you actually really need to mean like who you're reaching out to and what you're saying, and I guess just kind of showcasing your like neurodivergent talent, your employees who do work with disabilities on your website, your marketing materials, just again to show that it's you're not just saying it for the sake of saying it. You have real stories of trying to make a difference.
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of questions kind of around that, you know, attraction and communication piece kind of at the outset to try to draw candidates in, but we've also got quite a few questions then on the process itself, which we're going to kind of move on to. And I'd like to start again, Adam and Angela, coming back to you from your perspectives. We've already touched on it a little bit briefly, I think, with what you've said, Angela, but what are the most challenging parts of a recruitment process for you as individuals? Adam, would you like to answer that first?
Sure. So for me, it's really only like small things. So for example, you know, everyone knows you need to dress smartly for an interview, but I can't tie my shoelaces and I can barely tie a tie. You know, I tie it very strangely. So then, you know, I've noticed an interview and I look much less smart compared to other candidates. Timekeeping is also a bit tricky, so I might be, you know, 5 minutes late. But it's mainly the smart thing because, you know, if I know I'm not like my ties and done properly or my laces aren't done, or I feel self-conscious about that, and then going to the interview, I feel nervous that someone might notice and look down upon me on that. I think it's just important, you know, set expectations that, you know, this might be different, but it's fine that this is different.
And what about the process itself? So that you're thinking about how you're presenting yourself from what the feedback you've just said. But what about the kind of going through some of the questions, and is that kind of the way that a lot of organisations structure a recruitment process? What do you find anything challenging in that, or is it more about the interaction face to face when you get to the end of it?
For me personally, it's more about you know the interaction face to face. But then Angela might have a different lived experience, right? All disabilities are different.
Angela, what about you then?
There's something I wanted to go back to quickly before I answer that question with your last question that you said, and I think it's about not just knowing that you're taking neurodiversity people, but knowing the stages they went through, And B, what are your solutions to my problems? So great, you say that you're helpful, but actually, how have they helped you? Because I've also got sickle cell. So I've got, when you're talking about these groups that you're trying to hit, I used to be part of a sickle cell group. And so one of the things is when people come to sell us something, we are a hard group to sell because we've been let down so much. But what is the physical? So one good thing is to hear, no, I've done it. So for example, one thing we weren't able to do was have health, not benefits, but the things like if you were ill and then you would phone them up and they'll help you pay. But being sickle cell, if we had a crisis and then we buy into it, they would turn around and say, oh, you've got sickle cell, so they'd never pay us out. So when someone was coming from finance to sell us something new recently, we've already got our backup. We already know that so many people have tried it and failed. But then they come back with how it works and that someone else has used it and it's worked for them, so you use it. And then you listen a little bit more. So there needs to be some practicality to what you're selling, not just, I've got this beautiful A+ product that we've got for you, because there's been so much years of disappointment and learning how to maneuver. That's what I was thinking about that one.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah.
In the response to this question, yes. I find it hard when A, you've got to do tests, B, to answer questions, because I realise, and I'm only realising this now, I like tasks. I'm very much someone who is, show me what to do and I'll do it. If I don't know it, I'll learn it. And when it comes under pressure to answer these questions in a certain way, or I know my writing, I run a lot, so sometimes a grammar could be a bit poor. Or if you've got to do these tests, I don't get it. So I do feel like there's a whole block because there's no one to teach me how to do it any other way than the way that I know how. So I do think there is, and that's why sometimes I tick the boxes and I don't, because I think they might look at my jobs and think, oh, she might have enough transferable skills to do this job. Let me look into her deeply because she's got a learning difficulty, or you know, because I've ticked it so many times, I still don't get an interview.
Yeah.
And yet, when I read the job specification, I think, oh, I could do this job.
Yeah. So a more flexible approach from employers in terms of how they're assessing you for that job is kind of what you'd be looking for evidence of, and the flexibility in a process, I guess, to be able to demonstrate your capability and potential to do that job.
Yeah.
Than tests.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam? Are there any obstacles that are kind of getting in your way of applying for jobs? The things that you think in a process, makes me feel hesitant about applying to this organisation? Anything that stops you?
Well, like I said, I started my career quite early because I was an apprentice, and the main problem I had was just knowing stuff is out there. Just sort of like throughout the school system, you know, because I have a learning difficulty, I'm put in a box. And, you know, there's never like the expectation I would go to university or I would work in the city. So where my peers would go to, like, you know, careers fairs with employers and they hear about all these possibilities, I wouldn't normally be attending because it was just assumed that I wouldn't go on to do these things. So for me, the key thing is just, you know, make sure people know and we reach out to the communities that need it.
Thank you. Di, I'm going to bring you in now in your capacity as a specialist in assessment processes and designing processes for people to be able to demonstrate their potential, really, and just recommendations from you about what organisations should be using in assessment and throughout the process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can probably touch on some of the bits in terms of what tests I suppose we can use as well in that. And I think particularly ensuring, I suppose one of the key things, ensuring none of those assessments are really focusing on that past experience. I think we're all sitting here today and everything we're talking about is overcoming those hurdles, in particular in the recruitment process, which naturally has meant actually some neurodivergent candidates are less likely to have past experience due to not being able to get through these hurdles in the processes to date. So I think removing that barrier and focusing more on that potential piece and kind of future focused where possible as well is kind of a key one. And kind of touching back onto Theo's piece earlier where you were talking about kind of those spikier profiles, and for instance, dyslexic candidates potentially more likely to be higher in creativity. You might have other areas as well. Focusing less on kind of different stages of a process where you can knock candidates out on a strength that might not be strong for them, so pure numerical ability or pure verbal, but creating a blended whole person assessment that actually means that you can see across those potentially spikier areas. You're not knocking a candidate out on an area they may not perform as well on. You're getting a whole insight into that person as well, is a key one. And moving to potentially as well, non-time tests is a big one as well. So you might find a lot of those online psychometric cognitive ability tests can be timed. I think moving away from that and taking away the time pressure, one, can also help with some of those adjustments in terms of extending time. It's already pre-built in. Candidates can go through the test in their own time. There's less time pressure. That can also help in other aspects of diversity and inclusion, because females are more likely to score lower on time tests as well. So you can tick off quite a few things as you're going through that as well. So there's some examples of how you can change parts of your process too. But I think other bits when it comes to language, and I think we have talked about this as we're going through. So I know we've been talking about adjustments, and I think one thing really key to call out is, as we've been referring to adjustments throughout, making sure you don't kind of talk about reasonable adjustments at any point, but just referring to adjustments as a key one. And it's a really, really quick win removing that word. But what it means is, a candidate reading it, you haven't deemed what is reasonable for them. At that point, you can actually have the open conversation and talk through what you can actually do in the process for them, and kind of have that kind of preempted and thought through before you get to that point as well. And again, a bit that Theo talked about before in terms
that's
of
me or
can you still hear me? Yeah. And then another bit that Theo talked about earlier in terms of different formats and just reviewing at any point of your process where you might have. Can everyone hear me? Is it Cassie's? Is it Cassie's one?
Sorry, yeah, it is Cassie's computer. We are just working out.
All right, then I'll crack those. So as I was saying, back on Thea's point there in terms of different formats. So anywhere where you've got those lengthy stretches of text, whether that be an application forms, potentially be any marketing material, instructions for tests, anything. One, have a look through if you've got any long-winded sentences, simplify them down into smaller, more easily digestible one, but also have different formats. Can you have somebody from your recruitment team or somebody in role actually read this out and create filmed content? For example, dyslexic candidates, it's a lot easier for them to kind of read through and digest that information instead of spending a lot longer than other candidates reading through that content as well. So they're just some simple, quick wins for you there as well.
Thanks, Di. I was moving around the table at that point. For some reason, even though we're all in the same room, my computer lost its network, and Jasmine and Emily's didn't. So new backdrop. Thank you so much for that. And just Eleanor, you kind of listening to what Di's talked about in terms of the language and the shift in the way that you're assessing all candidates, but specifically, so we're talking about neurodiverse candidates. Is there kind of top 3 recommendations from your experience that you would recommend implementing organisationally?
Yeah, definitely. And it's very much going to echo what Diane said. So firstly, I would recommend always taking a strengths-based approach to recruitment. People often think strength is just something that you're good at, but it's also the things that you enjoy doing. And it's this combination of being good at something and enjoying doing it that makes strengths so special and good to recruit against. And it also, and this is a bit that echoes what Dan said, it means that candidates are being assessed on their potential rather than on their background, their experiences, and the opportunities that they have happened to have been given in their past. And so at EY, we work with a strength specialist called Capfinity, and they just help ensure that we're assessing the right strength for our organisation. And again, a company I mentioned briefly before earlier, and they work with Lexic to truly embrace the neurodiversity and ensure that organisations do consider how they ensure greater accessibility across talent assessment and development practices. Then secondly, again, I know I've said this a lot, but don't be afraid to work with third-party experts. So the likes of My Plus Consulting that I've mentioned, or you could consult with different charities who are experts in their areas. They can perform audits on your process to point out where improvements can be made, or offer advice if you're struggling in a particular area and offer you training. And then finally, I think just welcome open communication with all candidates. If adjustments need to be made to the process, listen to them and what they need, as they're gonna, in most circumstances, they're gonna know what's best for themselves. Especially if you've recently adapted your recruitment process, you need to be open to welcoming feedback from neurodiverse candidates and individuals in your business. Then, if possible, adapt your recruitment process mid-cycle. If not, note it down for next season, but otherwise make sure you're willing to make those adjustments throughout the season for candidates to support them in whatever way they need.
Yeah, and Di, you know, obviously one of the things that, you know, we've been developing and doing with our clients is that identification of potential. And one of the things that obviously we do get asked by the clients that we work with is, what do we do if we're taking away the kind of more traditional route, the CV and the reasoning test? What do we replace them with? So just, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of your position on that and what we've been doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think removing that CV, one, to my point earlier, the big piece is around that past experience as well. That completely removes that. And again, focusing on that future potential piece, which does level the playing field for everybody who's kind of looking towards that as well. So that's kind of the key one. And with that, moving into any assessments that could look for that. So for instance, your more future focused situational judgment tests, and there's a bit I can talk through in terms of language on that as well, in terms of what you can use within those tests particularly. And then when it does come to some of those cognitive ability tests as well, yes, there can sometimes be that inherent bias, and particularly the forced choice responses as well. So where possible, ensuring if you can make an adjustment in these more automated assessments, being able to have free text for candidates who can get to a point here, particularly neurodiverse candidates who do not agree with potentially the way a particular response is worded and just prefer to write it in their own format. Again, that really makes the test a lot more accessible for those candidates as well. So they're just a couple of examples there of how you can switch it up.
Yeah, and I think as a kind of community of employers, I think there's a huge kind of movement towards a more inclusive process and moving away from past experience. I think I think most organisations in the sector are very kind of committed to that now, but I think we do see pushback and sometimes a lack of understanding from some of the internal clients, the business stakeholders, in a shift in the process and why are we doing things in this way. So any tips on how to change the mindsets of business stakeholders that are potentially more tied to the more traditional assessment processes that they've been through in the past and they think potentially more appropriate?
And I think one of the things I would say here is that kind of the upfront engagement. I know Dave spoke a lot about it earlier, but particularly when we're designing any assessments, we do kind of that insights gathering phase where we do speak to a range of stakeholders at different levels. And with that, we can really get under the skin of what is it you're actually looking for in the role. And a lot of the time that doesn't fall down to past experience. So when you start to share those insights back, it's all kind of can start to ring true actually with some of those stakeholders of what we're looking for and how can we then build that into our process that doesn't rely on some of those previous experiences too. So that's a really good way to do it, really engage them at the start of the process so they do buy into what you're doing as well later on.
I guess data is always, we talked about data at the very beginning, didn't we? It's called, what's the evidence? How has that shifted the recruitment that we've done based on previous? What's the success of those candidates that we've brought in this different way to more traditional ways? I think is always coming back to that evidence, which obviously takes a couple of years to be able to gather, because you need to recruit people and they need to be able to demonstrate in role how they're performing. Is that something that you're doing within EY, Eleanor, that kind of data points as well as that's what Di talked about?
Yeah, definitely. Well, EY is a professional services firm made up of mainly accountants, so everyone's very data driven. If you ever want to do any change, it's got to be led by data and like evidence of what we want to do. But we haven't accepted CVs in our student recruitment process as long as I've been in the student recruitment team, which has just been, well, I've been in the student recruitment team for 3.5 years at EY for coming on 6 years, but I don't think even I had to use my CV when I was hired as a graduate. But even then, so we've had buy-in from senior leadership for a long time on that. But even now, you'll still get a couple of interviewers who, when you put candidates through to final interview, are like, "Where's their CV? I don't know anything about them." And you're like, "You haven't used this for years." It's like you need to just take that interview for what it is, just that interview. Don't base it on the past performances, on the stages they've been through the process already. They've passed those, they're at the final interview. You're literally just assessing them on their motivation and the strength that we have given you and the questions that we have given you to to do that. And again, I think another piece from that is at EY we recently, I think it was last year, implemented this new training for all recruiters have to go through it, and all partners or people who are doing final interviews have to go through quite a lengthy unconscious bias training, and so that covers every single aspect of diversity. And so I think that is kind of helping quite a lot with the understanding. I've definitely had a lot less pushback this past year on getting someone's CV and past experiences, but yeah, it's got to be data led normally in my firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got those are the questions that have been submitted ahead of today's session that we've kind of gone through, and a couple more kind of that added in as we were going along. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody attending, is there anything they'd like to ask any of the panel, or any kind of discussion points they'd like to make? And if you have, please kind of raise your hands or switch off unmute yourselves and ask. And if not, then you've got sort of 9 minutes back in your lives to potentially get a cup of tea before the next meeting. I think we're all pretty much back to back these days, aren't we? But thank you so much for attending, and panelists, thank you so much for joining us and giving up your time today to share your understandings and your learnings and your perspectives. It's been really helpful and we really appreciate it. And anybody that's got any ideas for future sessions, we're always kind of looking for what the hot topics are from an employee perspective, so please ping them through to us. And we're looking at our kind of content calendar for the next 6 months at the moment, so any suggestions would be really, really, really welcome. So thank you, have a great Wednesday, and see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.